Come on in, pull up a chair and take a load off because today I'm going to share my review as well as a bit of a how to play for Votes for Women from Fort Circle Games. Should you be casting your ballot for this card-driven historical board game? Or would you be better served vetoing your gang from purchasing Votes for Women? Well, you're going to find out right after this. Howdy, gang, and welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. Thanks for joining me once again. As I mentioned in the open, today I am going to share my review as well as a bit of a how to play for Votes for Women, which is from Fort Circle Games. It's designed by Tory Brown with graphic design provided by Bridget and Delicato. This game is for 1 to 4 players, ages 12 and up, plays in around 60 to 75 minutes. It does carry an MSRP of $75. All that said, let's swing on over to the other camera because I've sort of got Votes for Women set up. So before I dive into how to play, let's talk about the components. And component quality, overall, really nicely done. The rulebook itself, very clearly presented. I had absolutely no issues trying to understand how to play Votes for Women. I read through it once, and then during our first playthrough, I consulted it a couple of times. But all in all, crystal clear, very nicely presented. Something else I really dig about Votes for Women is that we get a short historical supplement with designer notes. Not real long, but I always love to get more information about the history that a game is simulating. And then we also get a bunch of reproductions of various different historical documents having to do with the suffrage movement in the United States from the 1840s through like 1919, 1920. Thought that was very cool. I like that quite a lot. And kudos to Tory Brown and Fort Circle Games for going the extra mile and including that. So let's kind of tour the board a little bit. So as you can see, we have the continental United States laid out here, the 48 states there that were part of the United States in 1920. We also have state cards. So these can be earned. These are sort of one and done event cards that can be earned by either faction. And there are actually 9. I'm actually blocking one of them with my mug. So there is a deck of 12. So you're going to shuffle them up. You're going to remove 3 states. And in essence, these are our battleground states for this game. We also have strategy cards over here. So there is a strategy phase which begins each turn from turns 2 through 6, where the suffrage player is going to bid support buttons in order to try to gain a strategy card of their choice, but it can be blocked or beaten by the opposition player in order for them to either block the suffrage player from getting any strategy cards or actually claiming a strategy card of their own. Both the state cards and the strategy cards can be used during a round in addition to playing one of your event cards. Each of the factions does have their own deck of cards as well. So we've got the states. They are broken up into 6 regions, and each of the regions is color-coded as well. So the premise of the game is for the suffrage player to lobby Congress in order for Congress to send the 19th Amendment to the states, for each of the states to ratify the amendment, and bring the amendment into law where women would now have the right to vote. The opposition player is looking to stop that. So we also have a section of the board here where we have some cards, some events will be in effect for the remainder of the turn, some for the remainder of the game, and others are used only in final voting. So the suffrage player needs to get all 6 support columns in here for Congress, and then 36 states need to ratify the amendment. The opposition player will win if they prevent the suffrage player from getting the support in Congress, and failing that, if they get 13 denials, basically, they vote not to ratify, then they win. So we also have 6 turns to do this by. So if the either faction has not gotten the number of ratifications or denials that they need to win, then we will look to go to a final vote, which is pretty simple as far as the process for the undecided states that we have got. We have these different meeples for campaigners. We have cubes of support. And I will point out that the suffrage player has both purple and yellow support, and there's no difference between the two. It's basically just a couple of factions within the suffrage movement, and then the opposition gets the orange. So these will be our campaigners that we will use to campaign around the country. I'll talk about that in just a bit. We have the different cubes. We have check marks for ratification. We've got X's for denial. And then we actually have extras of the campaigners as well as the check marks and the X's. Strangely enough, we don't have any extra cubes for support. I was kind of surprised by that. Should also point out, we've got the Oppobot deck. So you can play this 1v1, 2v2. You can play it solitaire against the Oppobot, and you can play solitaire as either the suffrage movement or the opposition. And you can also play 2 players against the Oppobot. So I really do love the fact that there are a variety of ways that you can approach playing votes for women. We also have these support buttons, which you'll notice the suffrage movement has far more in their supply than the opposition. And these buttons are going to be used for a variety of different things, which I'll get to right now, because we'll talk about how we play. So to start off, each of the players, each of the factions, I should say, has a starting card. So this card is going to be used as an event to begin the game. Now, in the first turn, we do not have a strategy phase to worry about. We are just going to go right into the card play. So on each turn, each player is going to have 7 cards. So in the first turn, they'll have their start card and then a hand of 6 additional cards. Now, these cards are broken up by era. So we have an early era, we have a middle era, and then we also have a late era. So when you're seeding the deck, you're going to take your late cards, you're going to shuffle them up, put them down. You're going to take your middle cards, shuffle them up, put them on top of the late, and then obviously enough, take your early cards, shuffle them up, and put them on top of the deck. And then you're going to start off with your start card. So the suffragist player goes first each turn. So as an example, we would need to start off with using this as an event. So this is the Seneca Falls Convention. So we would actually add campaigners of both colors into the Northeast region. We receive 2 support buttons, and we also get 2 support cubes in New York. Now, what we're aiming to do is each faction wants to get 4 cubes of support in a state. Now, before the amendment goes to the states, that will claim you a state card if there's a state in play, right? Not every state has a state card. So these are just the battleground states that are in play for the game. So once you get 4 support, if that state has a state card, then you're going to claim it. So as an example, New York does. So that would be that card there. Now, as the opposition player would have their hand of cards and their start card, and they would need to play this as an event. So it is the patriarchy. So they're going to add a campaigner to the south, and then they get to add 1 cube of support into any state in the Northwest. Let's go New Jersey there. In the Atlantic and Appalachia. Let's go Pennsylvania. We also have the South. Let's go Georgia. And also the Midwest. We'll go Illinois. So you may not notice this, but all of those states that I just put support into have state cards. Now, as far as these cubes, you can only have cubes of 1 faction in a state, keeping in mind these 2 colors are still the same faction. So if the suffrage player were to play a card that allows them to, let's say, place support in the Midwest, they want to do that in Illinois, they were placing a cube of support, they would just take this out. So if you are familiar with 1960 making of a president from GMT Games, same exact kind of process, that putting in support where support already exists for the opposition removes their support. Now, there are cards for both factions. So for the suffragist, you're looking at, it'll say, okay, well, you get to put a particular color into a region or a state. And the opposition also has cards that will allow the removal of particular colors of the suffrage player, depending on like yellow or purple. So keep that in mind. So as the suffrage player, you're probably going to want to try to do a mix when you're putting support into a state. So that way it's impossible for the opposition player to wipe out all your support with just a single color in an event card. So that would have been the event for the opposition players. And then these just get discarded. So unlike, say, Twilight Struggle, you're not going to reshuffle cards. So these will be discarded. They're now out of play. So as this game will go on, because each faction has their own deck, there is no juggling whether to be able to use a card, but then the opposition gets that event or anything like that, like you find in Twilight Struggle, where you have like operation points or anything like that. That does not come into play. That's not part of the design for Votes for Women. But what you can do with your cards, you have 4 different options on how to use your cards. So you could play the card for an event. So as the suffrage player, I say, okay, I'm going to play Lucy Stone. That gets another coin, button. I know we kept calling them coins for some reason. Support button, and get to add one of either color in one state in each region. So, okay, so we could say, well, going to go New York to get 3, and then take it out of here, take it out of here, take it out of here, add one, and add one. Let's say that. So just to kind of give you an idea, playing it as the event, right? So then we got our opposition player. And you can also play a card to gain those support buttons. So you just spend the card, doesn't matter what it is, spend the card and you will get the number of buttons for your faction as you have campaigners in play. So that is something else that could be done. Then we also have lobbying Congress. Now remember, the suffragist has to get all 6 of these filled in of support. So they can spend a card, and then they take 6-sided dice, and the number equal to the number of campaigners you have in play. So this would be 2. Now, all in all, the suffragists can have up to 4 campaigners, whereas the opposition can only have at most 2. So you can use that. You're rolling the 6-sided dice, and you're looking for a 6. All right, no 6s. But one of the things we can do with our buttons is spend them to re-roll dice. So the trick is that if you're re-rolling the dice, you have to re-roll all the dice. So you can't sit there and say, well, I'm going to keep that, and then I'm going to re-roll this. You got to re-roll them all. So let's say spend that again. Still nothing. All right. Spend another. Whoops. Still nothing. And the suffragist player said, you know what? I'm going to cut my losses. That's it. So something else you spend your cards on? Buttons. Also, lobbying Congress. Now, once this fills up with support, then you're done with this, because the amendment has gone to the states. So there's no reason to sit there and lobby Congress either way anymore, because the amendment is before the states. Now, something else that you can spend your card on is campaigning. And when you're campaigning, you just simply spend your card. You're going to take one of the 12-sided dice, which actually go 1 to 4. So it could be a 4-sided die, really, because the number of faces for each value is equal. So it's not like an averaging die. So you're going to roll a 12-sided die for each of your campaigners. So as the opposition player playing that campaign, I would get to roll the 1 die. Yuck. That's usually how I've been rolling dice playing this game, as the opposition, poorly. So this would give me 1 cube of support that I could spend in this region that my campaigner is in. But what I can also do is I can spend a coin to move my campaigner. So I could spend my cube of support here in this region and then move by spending that coin. Or I could just move them with the die and then spend my support in the new region that I've moved to. Now, one thing that you cannot do is you cannot split it up. So let's say, as an example, I rolled a 4 down here in the south. I couldn't say, I'm going to drop 2 here, then I'm going to move to the northeast and drop another 2. No, you have to spend the support that you gain from your campaigner all in one place, all in one region. It doesn't have to be in the same state, but it has to be in that same region. You can't use some, then move, spend the rest. So those are the 4 different things that you can use your cards to do. So what you're going to do is you're going to just keep going back and forth in these rounds. And something else you're able to do during the round is spend a state card or any of the strategy cards you may have earned. Now remember, at the beginning of each turn from 2 to 6, there's a strategy phase where suffragist player gets the bid buttons, the opposition gets to match that or exceed it, and that's how you claim these strategy cards. Now, keep in mind, even if the opposition player doesn't throw any coins out there, the suffragist still has to spend those buttons. I keep saying coins. The buttons that they bid. So if they said, well, I'm bidding 3, and the opposition player had 3 buttons, and they're like, yeah, well, I'm not spending any. The suffragist player still has to spend those 3 buttons. So you can spend your state card or your strategy card during your round. So as an example, let's say the suffragist player played that as an event. They did what they needed to do. If they had a state card or a strategy card, they could also play that, either before or after they play the other card. Now, they can only play one state or a strategy card during a round. They can't play multiple cards. So it's important to keep that in mind as well. All right, so you're going to play through 6 turns. By that point in time, you should see normally at some point prior to the end of the 6th turn, this fill up with support, and then you have the amendment go to the states. As soon as that happens, what you're going to do is you're going to look at the states, and you're going to find the states that already have 4 cubes of support, and you're going to essentially replace those cubes with either a check mark or an X. So, as an example here, let's say in the 2nd turn, the suffragists got 4 support cubes in New York. Well, New York is a card. It's got a state card. So that would have gone to the suffragist player. And then because the amendment isn't in front of the states yet, that support would just sit there. Now, if there was still 4 support, the moment that this fills with 6 markers, then you're going to replace that with the check mark. And of course, if there's 4 opposition support, you're going to give it the X. And then from there on out, through the end of the game, anytime a state has 4 support cubes from a faction, it's either going to get a check mark for the suffragists, or it's going to get the X for the opposition. And most of the time, before you get to the end of the 6th turn, you should have the decision. You should have the vote. Either the suffragist player has gotten the 36 states to ratify, or the opposition has gotten the 13 states to deny ratification. If that does not happen, you're going to go to final voting. Now, remember, I had mentioned you've got cards that could be in effect for the rest of the turn, rest of the game, and then final voting. So there are some cards that could be in this section here that you're going to use and you're going to resolve. And it's a real quick process to go through for the undecided states. And at this point in time, if you've gotten through 6 turns, you're not looking at too many states that are undecided. So once you've done that, then you're finished. And of course, once again, if 36 states ratify, then the suffragists win. And if that does not happen, then the opposition wins. And that pretty much in essence is how you play votes for women. So let's swing on over to the other camera so I can share some final thoughts and provide you with a review score. I like Votes for Women quite a lot. And I'll be the first to point out that this very well could have been a 10 out of 10 game. I enjoy it that much, but I have a fairly large issue with the design as it stands. And there are probably a few different ways to tweak the balancing to make it a little more even. So the game does skew to the suffrage side, which historically it should, because by 1920, or actually 1919 is when the final state ratified. By that point in time, the United States was like one of the only industrialized countries that did not allow women to vote. So it was going to happen at some point in time. So I understand that the game would skew in that direction, because if it doesn't, then it's not being historical. But you have to keep in mind, this is also a game. So you've got two sides going at it. Each side should feel that they have an equal opportunity to win, which unfortunately, as the opposition player, is not the case, at least not from the times that I have played Votes for Women, because it gets to the point where the suffragists start getting cards that have that can be really, really powerful, and the opposition doesn't have cards like that. So there are a few things already going on, and yes, I know you're going to say, well, but come on, Jeff, suffrage side needs to have 36 states ratify. The opposition only needs 13 states. I get that, but there are so many ways for the suffragists to get far more support than you can with the opposition. Right off the bat, the opposition gets fewer campaigners to send around trying to, rally support. There are far more buttons for the suffragists as opposed to the opposition. Some of the cards, like I started to say, are very, very powerful. We were in the mid-game in one game. I was playing my best friend, Elliot Miller, and he was playing as the suffragists. And he had a card that allowed him to roll a D8 for each of his campaigners he had in play. And he had 2 campaigners in play. And unlike the 12-sided die, the 8-sided die is 1 to 8. So he rolled the 2 dice and he got 2 8s. And it was like, holy cow. That's 16 cubes of support that he got. Now, at this point in time, you already had, in this game we were playing, the amendment is before the states. So I think the card said he could only spend no more than 2 cubes of support per state. But he got a bunch of states right there with that one card to ratify the amendment. I was like, holy cow. Then, next time it comes around to his turn, he played a card that was almost exactly the same. I was like, what the hell? I don't have any cards like this. At least I didn't run across cards like that. So, once again, this game skews heavily from my playing it to the suffragist side of things. And just a few tweaks could make it more even. One thing right off the bat, I would say if the game got to the final vote tally, that should be like a Pyrrhic victory for the opposition. That they have forced the suffragists to spend so much time, money, and energy to finally get to the point where they've got a chance of the ratification of the amendment, that the opposition comes out ahead. Something like that. I mean, it doesn't have to be something major. Even something like either faction can spend a button to make somebody re-roll dice. That would help negate the huge swings of support that can take place with some of the cards from the suffragist deck. Now, having said that, I honestly feel that there's a balance issue with the game. I also understand that, you can't have a historical game that doesn't play out historically. Otherwise, it's just silly. That's why you won't see a war game about the Battle of the Alamo where the Texicans actually have a legitimate shot at defeating the Mexican army. It's impossible. So any board game that features the Alamo is simply the Texicans achieve victory by delaying the Mexican army, which is what happened historically. So I understand that. I'm just kind of, like I said, I wish there was a way to tweak the game just a little bit so it feels like the opposition player actually has a shot at victory, because the way it stands from my playing, it's pretty darn tough for the opposition player to win. The easiest way for them to actually win is to prevent the suffragist player from being able to actually get the amendment out to the states, to deny those 6 columns of support in Congress. But once again, that's not very easy either. So even with my concerns about the balancing of votes for women, I still really like this game. So that's saying something. Like I started my final thoughts section, this could have been a 10 out of 10 game. Even the way it is right now with the balancing issue, I still give this an 8 out of 10. It is that good. I really do like it. And I would still be willing to play as the opposition, knowing that I'm pretty much behind the 8 ball throughout the entire game. So I really, really do like this. And I got to be honest, if you like card-driven historical games, you really should add Votes for Women to your collection, even with that balance issue. All right, that is it for this time out. If you like the video, of course, be sure to give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And of course, if you do subscribe, don't forget, ding that bell, because it'll not only notify you when I share videos such as this review, it'll also let you know when my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, airs Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday evenings live right here on YouTube at 7 p.m. Central. Of course, when you're not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for all the latest in tabletop gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more that you won't find here on the YouTube channel. Thank you very much for taking time out to check out this video. And until I see you next time, here's hoping each and every one of you get to enjoy plenty of great gaming with your gang.
Oh, hey, you're still here. That's okay. You don't have to leave just yet. In fact, why don't you subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel right here, or take a peek at the latest live stream, or even find out what YouTube recommends you check out from the channel. And of course, I'm Jeff McAleer. Thanks again for watching.